there's this really specific, almost universal frustration that I think every single person listening to this right now has experienced at least like a dozen times.
Oh, absolutely.
It usually hits on a Sunday night, right?
Mm.
Or maybe January 1st.
Mhm.
Or the day after you get a completely brutal performance review.
Yeah, that sudden burst of motivation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You look at your life and you just decide with this absolute fiery conviction that you are going to change. Like you're going to
Yeah.
build a new habit or learn some complex new skill or just completely shift your career trajectory.
Right, the whole new me phenomenon.
Yeah. So you do the things, you buy the ridiculously expensive leather-bound journal.
Oh, I've got like 5 empty ones on my shelf.
Same. You download the premium tracking app, you set your alarm for like 5 a.m., and for about 3 days, it's great. You feel like an absolute champion. You are just conquering your world.
The honeymoon phase of self-improvement, it feels fantastic because really you're just running purely on the dopamine of that new identity rather than, the actual structural reality of the habit itself.
And then, inevitably, day 4 hits.
It's always day 4.
Always. The alarm goes off, the room is freezing cold, the novelty is completely worn off, and suddenly you are just randomly throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Hoping anything sticks.
Right. You try this productivity tactic you read about, then you try some weird biohack, and when it all just slides off the wall into this messy, depressing pile on the floor, you arrive at that terrible, sinking conclusion.
The I am broken conclusion.
Yes, you just think, I am the broken component. Like, the system works for everyone else, so there is fundamentally something wrong with me.
And we personalize that failure instantly, don't we?
We really do.
We assume our willpower is defective or our character is somehow deeply flawed, and we carry this immense guilt around it. But if you look at the source material we're diving into today, the issue isn't a character flaw at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, it's an engineering problem.
Right.
Like, we're essentially trying to build a 90-story skyscraper without a blueprint and completely without any understanding of basic structural physics.
We just keep pouring concrete onto the grass and wondering why it won't stand up.
Exactly.
Which is why I'm so incredibly excited about this particular deep dive. We are looking at a set of source materials today centered around a framework called mathematics, specifically chapters S and T.
Yeah, the core architectural chapters.
And I know mathematics sounds like some futuristic operating system or something out of a sci-fi novel.
It really does.
But I promise you, it is one of the most grounded, surgically precise frameworks for human behavior I have ever seen.
It's fascinating.
It is. We are moving completely away from the realm of vague, just try harder, motivational advice. Our mission today is to literally look at the underlying code, the actual math that runs your personal transformation.
And the shift in perspective here is just profound. Because if you look at the traditional model of change, the one we're all taught in school and corporate training, it's almost exclusively linear.
Right, the straight line.
Yeah. You start at point A, you drag yourself to point B, and eventually, if you suffer enough, you arrive at point C, and boom, you're transformed.
You're suddenly the CEO or the fluent Spanish speaker or whatever.
Exactly. But the mathematics framework argues that this linear model is just a complete illusion. It actively sets us up for failure.
Because human transformation doesn't happen in a straight line.
Not at all. It's a spatial hierarchical structure. It's something you have to build in multiple dimensions simultaneously.
Okay, so spatial hierarchical structure. I was staring at the visualizations in the notes for this, specifically this concept they call the dynamic root square. And honestly, it took me a minute to wrap my head around what I was actually looking at.
It's definitely a dense visual.
Yeah, it's basically the architectural blueprint of what we're actually trying to build when we say we want to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it lays out this incredibly precise 4-level architecture.
Right.
And it starts at the absolute bottom, the most granular level, which the text refers to as the fruits.
Yes, the fruits. And in this specific framework, there are exactly 36 fruits that make up the entire architecture of an individual's capability.
Just 36.
Just 36. These are the atomic units of your behavior. They're highly specific, microscopic, daily practices.
So not like be a good person.
Oh, definitely not. A fruit is never something vague like be a healthier person or become a better leader. These are completely useless concepts at this level.
Okay.
A fruit is walk home from the office daily or read one peer-reviewed research paper every morning at 7 a.m. or even just spend 10 minutes stretching my hamstrings.
So they are the absolute smallest measurable actions.
Exactly. They're the atoms of your life.
Okay, so we have these 36 atomic fruits. And if we move up one layer in the blueprint, we hit level 3, which are called the leaves.
The leaves, yeah.
And the structure maps out 12 leaves in total, and each leaf is formed by combining 3 specific fruits together.
That's the math starting to build.
Right, and we'll get into the actual mechanics of how they combine in a minute, because that part is wild. But
Yeah.
the leaves are essentially the first level where these tiny isolated habits start to form a recognizable trait, right?
Right.
Like a functional state of being.
Exactly. And then from those leaves, the architecture moves up to level 2, which are the branches.
Okay.
There are 4 major branches, and each branch is composed of 3 leaves. The text categorizes these 4 branches as the major load-bearing pillars of your identity in the world.
And those were power, presence, purpose, and proclivity.
Yes. Power, presence, purpose, and proclivity. If the fruits are your daily microscopic actions, the branches are the massive structural pillars of who you actually are and what you can accomplish.
Which brings us to level 1, the absolute center of this entire chart, the root.
The root.
The emergent whole.
Yeah.
The complete transformed version of you. But as I was reading through how this blueprint actually functions, I hit this massive paradigm shift. It's a total inversion of how every single goal-setting seminar tells you to operate.
It really throws people off because conventional wisdom is always to start with the end in mind.
Right. Visualize the final result.
Yeah, visualize the root. Imagine the final perfected version of yourself crossing the finish line or sitting in the corner office, and let that vision pull you forward.
But mathematics just completely rejects that.
Completely. The blueprint explicitly states that the root is empty.
Wait, empty?
Yes. It is pure waiting potential. You cannot construct it directly. You cannot build a root.
So what do you do?
Instead, you build the atoms, those 36 fruits, and you allow the emergence to happen upward.
You know, I was trying to think of a good way to picture this, and it really comes back to building a house.
That's a great analogy.
You don't start the construction process by trying to hang the crystal chandelier in midair.
Right, or painting a wall that doesn't exist yet.
Exactly. You have to pour the concrete. You
You're
have to
right.
lay the bricks. You start at the absolute bottom. But honestly, as I was reading this, I felt a serious wave of skepticism.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I can totally imagine the listener thinking the same thing. Like, if I'm just spending my day focusing on 36 tiny, seemingly random fruits, like making sure I drink water and read a paper and walk home, how do I know I'm actually building a house?
It's a very fair question.
Right. How do I ensure I'm not just accumulating a pile of disconnected random hobbies that never amount to anything?
And that skepticism is entirely justified. It highlights the biggest danger of the modern, atomic habits movement.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, people think that if they just collect enough tiny good behaviors, a magnificent life will automatically materialize out of thin air.
Right, like habit hoarding.
Exactly.
Huh.
But a pile of bricks is not a house. Without an organizing principle, a pile of bricks is just a heavy, expensive tripping hazard.
That is a brutally accurate way to describe my 20s, by the way.
Right. For a pile of bricks to actually become a structurally sound wall, you need mortar. You need a binding agent that turns isolated actions into higher-level capabilities.
Okay, so what is the mortar in this system?
In mathematics, that mortar is a very specific active mathematical function. It does not happen by accident.
And this naturally bridges into what I found to be the most fascinating part of the source material. This is chapter T, right?
Yes, chapter T.
How do fruits actually become leaves? The framework introduces this thing called the synthesis operator. And visually, the symbol they use for this is so cool. It's a plus sign enclosed inside a perfect circle, denoted as the circled plus.
Yes, and the synthesis operator is truly the core engine of this entire philosophy. We really need to be incredibly precise about what that circled plus sign means, because the text makes a major point of clarifying what it is not.
Right, it is not a regular plus sign.
Exactly. It is not basic addition. Basic addition would just be a standard plus sign. If you have that pile of bricks and you just add more bricks, you still just have a pile.
Nothing fundamental has changed.
Exactly. It's also not multiplication. The synthesis operator represents emergence.
Emergence?
Yes. It represents the exact magical process by which distinct elements combine to create something genuinely new. Something with properties that completely transcend the sum of the individual parts.
They give this incredibly concrete example to illustrate emergence in the text, using a jazz musician.
Yeah.
Let's actually break this down because I feel like it clarifies the whole concept beautifully.
It's a perfect example.
Okay, so imagine you have a musician who is diligently developing 3 distinct fruits, 3 daily atomic practices.
Right.
Fruit 1 is studying the intellectual harmonic structure of a tune, basically the music thing.
Sitting with the sheet music, analyzing chord progressions.
Exactly. Then fruit 2 is practicing the physical, technical runs on their instrument.
Yeah.
Just running scales up and down for hours to build muscle memory.
The purely physical mechanics.
Right. And then fruit 3 is the auditory practice of listening intently to their ensemble partners, really hearing the bass and the drums.
Now, if you examine those 3 fruits in total isolation, none of them alone makes a functional jazz musician.
No, not at all.
You can memorize music theory perfectly, but if your fingers can't physically play the notes, you aren't a musician. You're a musicologist.
Right. You're just writing essays about jazz.
Exactly. And you can play scales at lightning speed, but if you can't hear what the bassist is doing next to you, you're basically just a human metronome making noise.
But when those 3 fruits synthesize, when you hit that state of fruit 1 synthesis, operated fruit 2 synthesis, operated fruit 3, something qualitatively different emerges from the friction between them.
Yes. You don't just get a sum of theory plus speed plus hearing.
You get a completely new emergent capability, responsive improvisation.
Exactly, responsive improvisation. It's a leaf. It didn't exist in the fruits.
I was explaining this to a friend yesterday, and the only analogy that really captures the permanence of this, for me anyway, is baking.
Oh, I like that. Baking.
Yeah, because if you take raw flour and you take sugar and you take eggs and you just dump them in a bowl together, they don't magically become a cake.
Yeah, they just sit there making a gross mess.
Right. That is simple addition. Flour plus sugar plus eggs. But when you apply the synthesis operator, which in baking is the active application of heat from the oven they synthesize.
A literal chemical reaction occurs.
Exactly. And they emerge as a cake. And the defining characteristic of synthesis here is that it is irreversible.
Yes, that's key.
You can't uncake it. You can't reach into a baked cake and pull out the raw egg. The previous elements have fundamentally fused into a higher order state.
That irreversibility is so crucial. And what's vital to understand here, and honestly, this is where so many ambitious people get completely stuck, is the tragedy of developing one fruit excellently in complete isolation.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about the corporate environment. You constantly see someone who develops incredible technical mastery. They have one specific fruit, let's say financial modeling, and they spend 5 years polishing it, making it absolutely perfect.
They are the best spreadsheet person in the building.
Right. And then they are deeply frustrated. They wonder why they aren't progressing, why they don't feel more capable as a leader, why they aren't getting promoted to director.
Because they're just a really big pile of flour?
Exactly. The harsh truth of this architectural math is that one fruit cannot generate a leaf. It is structurally impossible. A bowl of perfectly sifted flour will never be a cake, no matter how much you sift it.
You need all 3 constituent fruits developed together until they reach that point of fusion.
Yes.
But, okay, how does that fusion actually happen? Because the text doesn't just say, apply heat and hope for the best.
No, it's very precise.
It provides a very specific, measurable mechanism for this, which they call the 4th quarter principle, or the 25% overlap principle. The formula laid out is 75% construction plus 25% overlap equals 100% expression.
Right.
I struggled a bit with what that overlap actually looks like in daily life, though.
Think of the overlap as the exact, deliberate moment of active synthesis. It is the oven. If you think about those 3 fruits, developing them individually is the construction phase. You practice your scales in your bedroom. You study theory in a book. You practice ear training with an app. That is the 75%.
So that's the solitary work.
Yes. It is necessary, but it's incomplete. The leaf, the emergent capability, does not happen until that final 25%, which is the active overlap.
And what does that overlap actually look like?
The overlap is the exact moment you force yourself to actively use all 3 fruits in concert simultaneously in a real-world, high-stakes scenario.
Ah, okay. The source material gives a fantastic example of this in a business setting, looking at a senior engineer. Let's actually walk through that.
Let's do it.
So let's say fruit 1 is their deep historical knowledge of the company's clunky legacy systems.
They know where all the bodies are buried in the code.
Exactly. Then fruit 2 is their practical, hands-on coding mastery. They type fast, they know the syntax.
Right.
And fruit 3 is their ability to dynamically learn and research brand new bleeding-edge technologies.
So those are the 3 fruits.
The 25% overlap is the moment that senior engineer sits down in a room, to mentor a junior developer.
Yes.
Because in that single dynamic conversation, they are applying their historical perspective, filtering it through their practical mastery, while simultaneously exploring how to integrate the junior developer's new tech ideas.
They're firing all three fruits at the exact same time.
And the cognitive friction of doing all three at once is the overlap. That is the moment those separate skills fuse into the emergent leaf of, let's call it, informed perspective.
And if synthesis requires this active, intense 25% overlap, like if we have to intentionally put the ingredients in the oven and turn up the heat, it forces us to ask a much deeper question about this entire framework.
Right, which brings us to Chapter S.
Exactly. Where's the human being in all this math?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. We have all these variables floating around, the fruits, the leaves, the branches. But who is actually initiating the overlap? Who is running these equations?
I had the exact same thought when I was reading it. If we are looking at the literal math of our own lives, we have to locate ourselves in the formula.
We do.
And the source material handles this brilliantly by introducing what it calls the unity operator. And in their mathematical notation, this is represented simply by the number 1.
Now, we have to be very, very careful with how we interpret this.
Because it's not just a number.
Right. In traditional math, 1 is a quantity. It means a single item. But in mathematics, 1 is not a quantity at all. It is the unity operator.
So what does it actually represent?
It represents you. It represents the conscious agent, the focal point of awareness, the meta-mind operating inside the equation. It is the literal marker of your human agency.
Okay, so how do we actually use this one? The framework relies heavily on fractions, right? The basic structure of A over B to map out our relationship to all the different variables in our lives.
Yes, fractions are the core visual language here.
So the numerator, the top part of the fraction, is called the iterator.
The iterator.
This is the content. It is the action being taken, the specific thing being acted upon.
Right.
And then the denominator, the bottom part of the fraction, is the delineator.
The delineator, yes.
This is the context. It is the environment, the shaping force, the boundary conditions of the action. And there is one absolute non-negotiable rule that governs this entire system.
The denominator always governs.
The denominator always governs.
That is the bedrock law of this notation. In the logic of these expressions, whatever variable sits on the bottom of the fraction is the ultimate shaping force. It is the executive authority that dictates how the top part of the fraction is allowed to behave.
See, this is where the math suddenly becomes deeply, deeply psychological.
It really does.
Because there are two primary configurations for where you, the unity operator, the one, can be positioned in any given aspect of your life.
Right.
Configuration A is written as x over 1.
X over 1.
In this setup, the variable x is the iterator on top, and you, the 1, are the delineator on the bottom.
And because the denominator always governs, living in an x over 1 configuration means you are the shaping force.
You're in charge.
You are holding the executive authority. The text refers to this as iterator first mode. You are actively wielding the variable x.
So give me an example of that.
Sure. If the expression is skill building over 1, the internal translation is, I am actively shaping and driving my skill building.
Okay.
It is a psychological state of extremely high agency, high control, and active conscious pushing.
I'm making the schedule, I'm finding the resources, I'm doing the work.
Exactly. You are the engine.
But then we have configuration B, which completely flips the script. This is 1 over x.
1 over x.
Now, the unity operator 1 is in the numerator. You are the iterator. You are the content.
Yeah.
And the variable x sits on the bottom. It is the delineator.
And again, applying that golden rule, the denominator governs. So in 1 over x, the variable x is the shaping force.
So you are yielding to x.
Exactly. You are letting x dictate the terms of your behavior. This is delineator first mode.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
If the expression is 1 over mentorship, the internal psychology is, I am allowing myself to be shaped, guided, and constrained by the structure of this mentorship. You are yielding your immediate agency to a system, a principle, or an environment.
I want to make this hyper-concrete because the theory is incredibly dense.
It is. Let's ground it.
The text does this amazing deep dive into a very simple, everyday fruit. The habit of walking home from work.
Such a great example.
And it shows how simply moving the position of the 1 changes the entire lived reality of that habit. Let's look at attempt number 1, which is structured as walking over 1.
Okay, so in walking over 1, you are in the denominator. You are the shaping force.
Right.
The neurological reality of this is that every single day at 5:00 p.m. when you leave the office, your prefrontal cortex has to actively make the decision to walk.
You are driving the action from scratch.
You have total autonomy, which sounds empowering, but the psychological reality is massive decision fatigue.
Oh, I know this feeling so well.
Yeah. We all do. You finish a long, exhausting day of work, your cognitive resources are totally depleted, and now you have to negotiate with yourself.
Right. Your brain starts making excuses. It's a bit cloudy today. My feet kind of hurt. I have groceries to carry. Maybe I'll just take the train this once.
Exactly. Because you are the shaping force, the habit is entirely reliant on your daily, fluctuating reserves of willpower, and the inevitable result is inconsistency.
Because willpower always runs out.
Always.
So you realize the willpower game isn't working, and you decide to flip the equation. Attempt number 2 is 1 over walking.
1 over walking.
Now, walking is in the denominator. Walking is the governing force. You have yielded your executive authority to the absolute principle of the walk.
And when you adopt that 1 over walking mindset, the 5:00 p.m. negotiation completely vanishes.
Oof, gone.
You don't ask yourself if you feel like walking. The principle of walking governs your behavior, full stop. It is a non-negotiable system.
So your consistency will skyrocket.
Absolutely. You will walk every single day, rain or shine. But there is a significant psychological catch here.
What's the catch?
When you completely surrender your agency to a strict routine like that, it can start to feel incredibly rigid.
Oh, right.
It becomes robotic. You are successfully executing the habit, sure, but the joy is entirely drained from it because you feel like a passive cog in your own self-imposed machine.
You're just a prisoner to your own calendar.
Exactly.
And this tension leads to the absolute breakthrough in this chapter. Attempt number 3 is where we see the true, terrifying power of this notation. We create a synthesized, multivariable expression.
This is where it gets really fun.
I was looking at this formula in the notes, and honestly, it looks like high school algebra at first glance, but it is brilliant. The formula is open bracket, 1 over walking, multiplied by listening, close bracket, all over neighborhood.
It is a beautiful piece of architectural math. Let's peel it apart layer by layer.
Let's do it.
Inside the brackets, we have our baseline, 1 over walking. So the foundation of the habit is yielding to the non-negotiable principle of the walk. The decision fatigue is eliminated, the consistency is locked in.
Got it.
But then inside those same brackets, it is multiplied using the asterisk operator, which represents synergistic amplification by the variable listening.
Okay, so the mandatory, potentially robotic walk is actively amplified by the enjoyment of an audiobook or a podcast or a favorite album.
Exactly. But the real magic happens outside the brackets.
Right, the new denominator.
Yes. That entire bracketed experience, the mandatory walk amplified by listening, is placed over a completely new denominator / neighborhood.
So the physical environment of the neighborhood becomes the ultimate delineator.
Precisely. It filters the entire experience. You are yielding to the walk, you are amplifying it with audio, but you are allowing the specific route, the changing weather, the sights, the sounds of the neighborhood to spontaneously shape exactly how that walk unfolds on any given Tuesday. It brings the presence and the joy back into the rigid routine. It is the perfect synthesis of structure and spontaneity.
And what is so vital to grasp here is that the physical action, putting one foot in front of the other, is identical in all 3 scenarios.
Completely identical.
But the internal psychological architecture, dictated entirely by where you place the 1, changes your lived experience from exhausting to robotic to deeply fulfilling.
It's all about where you place the 1.
I have to jump in here, though. I have to push back a little because there is a massive cultural tension in what we are discussing right now.
Oh, for sure.
Because our entire modern culture, especially, hustle culture in the self-help industry, is utterly obsessed with taking control.
Be the master of your fate.
Exactly. We are bombarded with messaging telling us to be the CEO of our lives, to manifest our destiny, to grab the bull by the horns. We are socially conditioned to believe that we must always, without exception, be in the X over 1 configuration.
Always be the denominator.
Right. We feel like we are failing if we are not actively shaping our reality. So, doesn't giving up control to 1 over X, yielding to a system, or letting an environment shape us, doesn't that fundamentally feel like a sign of weakness?
That's the fear.
Isn't that just a fancy mathematical excuse for laziness or lack of ambition?
And that is the exact trap that high achievers fall into, and it is why so many of them are miserable.
Really?
Yes. The mathematics text explicitly warns against the catastrophic danger of staying in X over 1 forever.
Catastrophic danger.
Yes. Think about the cognitive load. If you demand to be the shaping force of every single variable in your life, your career trajectory, your daily fitness routine, your relationship dynamics, even optimizing your downtime, you are carrying the entire cognitive load of your existence on your prefrontal cortex.
You're just carrying the weight of the world.
You are making every single decision. You are manually forcing every outcome. That is the absolute fast track to ego depletion, severe decision fatigue, and eventual total burnout.
It makes so much sense when you put it like that. It's like trying to manually fire every single spark plug in your car's engine while you are simultaneously trying to steer the car down the highway.
That's a terrifying mental image, but yes.
Eventually, your brain is just going to misfire and the whole engine seizes up.
Exactly. The human brain is simply not designed to hold the one in the denominator for every aspect of life simultaneously.
It's too much.
But the inverse is also a dangerous trap.
Okay, the drift trap.
Right. If you swing the pendulum entirely the other way and stay in 1 over X forever, constantly yielding to what your boss wants, yielding to the corporate structure, yielding to whatever the social media algorithm feeds you, you lose your agency entirely.
You just become a passenger.
You enter a state of chronic drift. You become a passive consumer of your own life.
So what's the answer?
The grand secret of the metamind isn't picking one configuration and stubbornly sticking to it. The secret is knowing how to intentionally alternate between them.
Which brings us perfectly to the final, and honestly, I think the most liberating concept in our deep dive today.
The kick.
The kick. We have the danger of burnout from over-controlling on one side, and the danger of drift from over-yielding on the other. To solve this, the framework introduces the ultimate architectural safeguard, the inversion kick.
The inversion kick! I love that name so much.
It sounds like a specialized move from a fighting video game, right?
It really does. But it is actually a profound cognitive safeguard. It is a cognitive martial arts move.
Okay, break that down.
It is the conscious, deliberate act of alternating between Iterator first mode and Delineator first mode. It's the built-in mechanical switch that forces you to maintain equilibrium.
And the fundamental rule of the inversion kick is so elegantly simple, isn't it?
It's just one rule.
Whatever door you entered through first, you must eventually alternate to the other.
Exactly. If you started by controlling the content, you have to execute a kick and let the context control you.
The text provides this great comparative example of learning to play the guitar versus learning how to write code. Let's unpack that.
Let's do it.
So let's say you decide you want to learn Python, and you enter through the Iterator first door. You start as X over 1.
So you are driving.
Right. If you start your coding journey in Iterator first mode, you dive straight into the doing. You don't read the manual. You open a code editor, and you just start typing.
Making a mess.
Making a huge mess. You Google error messages as you go, you hack different pieces of code together, and sheerly through force of will, you build a messy, functioning website on day 1.
You are entirely driving the action.
And the distinct strength of this approach is that you gain rapid hands-on experience. You are highly motivated, and you don't get bogged down in abstract theory.
But the weakness.
And I have lived this exact scenario, so I know the weakness intimately.
Is that you eventually hit a massive brick wall.
Huge wall. Because you didn't yield to the foundational theory, you developed terrible, unsustainable habits.
Your code is a tangled mess of spaghetti.
It is. You reach a plateau where your sheer force of will just can't solve the complex bugs anymore. You are exhausted, you are frustrated, and you feel like you just fundamentally lack talent.
And that feeling right there, that feeling of hitting the plateau,
Yeah.
that is the system signal. That is the exact moment you must execute the inversion kick.
So what do you do?
You must consciously shift your position of 1. You move your internal state from coding over 1 to 1 over coding structure.
So you flip the fraction.
You flip it, you stop just doing, and you shift into Delineator first mode. You actively design the context.
And does that look like for the coder?
You yield to an external system. You buy a formal, structured course on data structures and algorithms. You find a senior developer to mentor you, and you actually listen to their strict rules about syntax. You let the environment shape your learning. You yield.
But wait, you can totally get trapped in that mode too.
Oh, completely.
I think we all know that person who decides they are going to write a novel.
Oh, the perpetual preparer.
Yes. So they spend 3 months setting up the absolute perfect Scrivener template. They buy a $200 mechanical keyboard.
They research the history of publishing houses for weeks.
Exactly. They design the perfect distraction-free writing environment. But they haven't actually written a single word of the story.
They are permanently stuck in Delineator first mode.
They're letting the context govern them so completely that the actual content never gets generated.
It happens all the time. The distinct strength of Delineator first mode is that you build an incredibly solid, structurally sound foundation.
Right?
But the weakness is that without action, without actually generating the iterator, that foundation is just an empty monument to preparation.
Wow. An empty monument to preparation.
So when you find yourself tweaking your Notion productivity templates for the 5th day in a row without producing any actual work, that is the signal.
The signal to kick.
You must execute the inversion kick again. You shift back to Iterator first.
Get back in the denominator.
Yes. Get your hands dirty. You write the terrible, messy first draft. You write the broken code. You play the wrong chords on the guitar. You let the solid, structured foundation you just built support your messy, active execution.
This is so incredibly practical. It gives you an actual diagnostic tool for why you feel stuck.
It does.
And the text doesn't just leave this as an abstract philosophical idea. It gives us a very specific operational tool to manage this in our daily lives, which they call the weekly position of one audit.
Yes, the audit. Because honestly, the mathematics framework is practically useless without active tracking.
Right. You can't just think about it once.
The audit is a simple 20-minute practice, ideally done on a Sunday evening when you are planning your week.
Okay.
You sit down with a piece of paper and you look at the major expressions of your life over the past 7 days, your core work projects, your fitness routine, your primary relationships, your hobbies.
The big buckets.
Right. And you literally count your configurations. You ask yourself, how many areas of my life were operating in X/1 mode this week? And how many were operating in 1/X mode?
So let's say I sit down on Sunday night and I look back and I realize that at work, I was intensely micromanaging my team, trying to hit a deadline.
So that's project over 1.
Right. And at the gym, I was forcing myself through this brutal, self-designed lifting routine that I absolutely hated.
Fitness over 1.
Okay. And then at home, I was rigidly dictating the entire weekend schedule to my partner because I wanted everything to be perfect.
Schedule over 1.
So I am staring at a piece of paper completely full of X/1s.
You are redlining.
I am completely redlining my executive control.
And the brilliance of the audit is that it makes that invisible psychological load completely visible. When you see that massive imbalance on paper, you know mathematically that you are at a high risk of burnout.
It's right there in front of you.
You are over-controlling your environment. So the prescription for the upcoming week becomes crystal clear.
You need to plan a strategic inversion kick.
Exactly. You look at that list of X/1s and you decide, okay, next week, I am going to shift my fitness to 1/class schedule.
Oh, nice.
I am not going to think about my workout. I am just going to show up to the Tuesday and Thursday spin class, sit on the bike, and let the instructor tell me exactly what to do. I am going to yield the control.
And at work, I'm going to shift to 1/team feedback.
Love that.
Instead of driving every meeting and dictating all the solutions, I'm going to step back, present the problem, and let the team shape the direction of the project.
It's all about strategically offloading that massive cognitive burden of control before it crushes you.
And I imagine the audit works identically in reverse.
Identically, if you do your Sunday review and you realize you spent the entire week just reacting to other people's emergencies in your inbox.
That's 1/inbox.
Yes. And you ate whatever fast food was convenient.
1/convenience.
Right, and you spent your evenings watching whatever the streaming algorithm auto-played next.
1/feed.
You are drifting. You are dangerously over-yielding to your environment. The mathematical prescription is to execute an inversion kick back to X/1.
Take the wheel.
Pick one specific domain and take the wheel. This week, I am doing deep work over 1. I am blocking out 2 hours every morning. I am turning off the router, and I am driving the project.
I love this so much because it removes all the emotional baggage from feeling stuck.
It completely depersonalizes it.
Right. If I'm hitting a wall at work or feeling completely overwhelmed by my life, my default is usually to have a mini existential crisis and ask, what is fundamentally wrong with me? Why can't I handle this?
Well, we all do that.
But with this framework, I should just step into the MetaMind control room. I should look at the math and ask, am I simply stuck in Iterator mode? Am I stuck in Delineator mode? Do I just need to execute an inversion kick and shift my interface with reality?
It is incredibly freeing. It completely removes the shame.
It does.
The machine isn't broken. You aren't defective. You just have to learn how to read your internal gauges and flip the switch. You have to recognize that true, sustainable balance is not a static state you achieve and lock in forever.
It's an active process.
It is a dynamic rhythm of continuous conscious alternation.
This has been an absolutely massive journey today, and there is just so much to digest. Let's recap the core architecture for you, the listener, to make sure we have all these structural pieces locked in.
Good idea.
We started by looking at the true blueprint of change, the dynamic root square. We saw how you absolutely cannot build the big emergent root first.
You have to start at the atomic level.
Right. You define your 36 fruits, the tiny, manageable daily practices.
And from there, we explored the reality that those fruits don't just passively stack on top of each other.
A pile of bricks is not a house.
Exactly. They must synthesize. Through the power of the synthesis operator and the active, high-friction 25% overlap of using multiple skills in real-world concert, those atoms permanently fuse into higher-order leaves and branches.
You have to actively bake the cake. You can't just collect the raw ingredients and hope.
Precisely.
Then, we located our own agency in the math using the unity operator, 1-1. We mapped out the vital psychological difference between being the iterator, driving the content, and burning willpower in X/1 mode, and being the delineator, yielding to the context and finding flow in 1/X mode.
We ingrained the golden rule. The denominator always governs.
Always governs. And finally, we explored the ultimate systemic safeguard, the inversion kick.
A lifesaver.
The absolute non-negotiable necessity of tracking your position of one, auditing your week, and consciously alternating between controlling your environment and letting your environment shape you.
It is the only mathematical way to protect your energy, prevent burnout, and avoid a life of passive drift.
It fundamentally changes everything about how you approach a new goal or a new habit or a new year. So I want to leave you with a final provocative challenge to mull over as you go about your week, maybe even as you walk home today.
Let's hear it.
Look at the single most exhausting, frustrating area of your life right now. The place where you feel like you are just throwing spaghetti at the wall and absolutely nothing is sticking. Are you exhausted because you are constantly playing the one in the denominator?
Are you desperately forcing yourself to shape every single variable, trying to be the CEO of every tiny, uncontrollable detail?
Exactly. What would actually happen tomorrow if you surrendered that specific control?
What if you intentionally allowed a system, a mentor, or a rigid schedule to shape you instead?
What happens when you finally stop fighting the math of your own mind and allow yourself to execute the inversion kick? Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the mathematical architecture of your own meaning. Remember to check your gauges, run your Sunday audits, and as always, stay curious.